They expected a lawsuit. They expected a public scream. They expected her to burn the building down. But when Sarah Vance walked out of the most prestigious fashion empire in New York City, she didn't say a single word. She didn't slam the door. She simply vanished. Her boss, the legendary Marcus Thorne, laughed it off, calling her replaceable trash. He was wrong. 6 months later, a single envelope arrived at her tiny apartment from the richest heiress in Europe, Victoria Sterling. That letter didn't just invite Sarah to Paris, it was a declaration of war that would expose a 20-year lie and turn the media upside down. This is the story of the woman who stayed silent until the world screamed her name. The fluorescent lights of the House of Thorne atelier hummed with the sound that Sarah Vance felt in her teeth. It was 3:00 a.m. on a Tuesday, 4 days before New York Fashion Week. The air smelled of burnt espresso, silk steam, and fear. Sarah stood over a mannequin, her fingers taped up where the needles had pricked her skin raw. She was 34, but tonight she looked 50. Her eyes were rimmed with red, and her brown hair was pulled back in a messy bun that hadn't been retouched in 12 hours. "It's wrong," a voice boomed from the doorway. Marcus Thorne strode in. He was a man who looked like he had been carved out of expensive marble, cold, polished, and hard. He was the face of the brand, the genius, the icon. He was also a fraud. He walked over to the gown Sarah had been draping for 6 hours. It was a masterpiece of midnight blue velvet and crushed tulle designed to look like a storm cloud caught in moonlight. "The waist is too high," Marcus snapped, not even looking at the construction. He held a glass of scotch in one hand and gestured vaguely with the other. "It looks like a potato sack. Rip it apart. Start over." Sarah's hands trembled just slightly. "Marcus, the show is in 90 hours. This is the structure you approved last week. If I rip the bodice now, the velvet will bruise. We don't have enough fabric to—" "I don't pay you to think, Sarah," Marcus roared, throwing his glass against the far wall. It shattered, sending shards of crystal and amber liquid across the white floor. The 3 interns in the corner flinched, terrified. "I pay you to move your hands. You are a pair of hands. That is it. You are a nobody from Ohio with a sketchbook I graciously allowed you to open." He stepped into her personal space, smelling of alcohol and expensive cologne. "Do you think anyone out there knows your name? Do you think they care? They buy Thorne? Without me, you are nothing but a seamstress in a strip mall." Sarah looked at him. For 7 years she had been the ghost. Every gown that won an award, every dress that graced the cover of Vogue, every revolutionary design that kept the House of Thorne relevant, it was all her. Marcus hadn't sketched a coherent line since 2015. She looked at the shattered glass. She looked at the terrified interns. Then she looked at the dress. "Fix it," Marcus spat, "or don't bother coming back after the show." He turned on his heel and marched out, slamming the heavy double doors. The room was silent. "Sarah," one of the interns, a young girl named Chloe, whispered, "I can help you rip the seams." Sarah exhaled. It was a long, slow breath. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her employee ID card. It was a simple piece of plastic that gave her access to the building at all hours, the access that allowed her to work herself to the bone while Marcus partied in the Hamptons. She placed the ID card on the cutting table. Next to it she placed her favorite pair of gold-handled shears. "No, Chloe," Sarah said softly. Her voice wasn't shaking. It was terrifyingly calm. "Don't touch the seams. The dress is perfect." "But he said—" "I know what he said." Sarah walked over to her desk. She didn't pack her personal belongings. She didn't take the picture of her mother. She didn't take her coffee mug. She opened the bottom drawer and took out a single battered black notebook. It contained 7 years of original sketches, the intellectual property Marcus thought he owned but never actually signed a contract for because he was too arrogant to believe she'd ever leave. "Sarah," Chloe asked, her voice trembling, "where are you going?" Sarah put on her coat. It was a cheap trench coat frayed at the cuffs. She walked to the door. She paused, looking back at the midnight blue dress. It really was a masterpiece. She looked at Chloe. If he asks, tell him I went to fix the problem. Sarah walked out. She took the elevator down 40 floors. She walked past the security guard Arthur, who gave her a sleepy wave. She walked out into the pouring rain of Manhattan. She didn't cry. She didn't call a friend. She took the subway to her small apartment in Queens, sat on her bed, and stared at the wall. She had walked away without a word, and the silence she left behind was about to become the loudest noise New York had ever heard. The fallout at House of Thorn was immediate, though the public didn't see it yet. At 9:00 a.m. the next morning, Marcus Thorn strolled into the atelier expecting to see a reworked dress. Instead, he found the dress exactly as it was, an ID card and a pair of shears. "Where is she?" Marcus demanded. Chloe, eyes wide, pointed to the door. "She left, sir." "Left for coffee." "No. She took her book." Marcus's face went pale. He knew about the book. He grabbed his phone and dialed Sarah's number. It went straight to voicemail. He called again. And again. By noon, the panic set in. The collection was only 80% done. The showstopper piece, the finale wedding gown, was just a concept in Sarah's head. She hadn't draped it yet. "She'll be back," Marcus told his PR manager, lying through his teeth. "She's just having a tantrum. She needs the money." But Sarah didn't come back. For the next 2 months, Sarah Vance ceased to exist in the fashion world. She blocked Marcus's number. She ignored the emails that ranged from threatening lawsuits to begging for a consultation. She needed to eat, but she couldn't work in fashion. Marcus would blacklist her anywhere in the city. He was powerful, vindictive, and petty. If she applied to a rival house, he would claim she stole trade secrets. So Sarah took a job at Miller's Cleaners, a small family-run dry cleaning business in a quiet neighborhood in Brooklyn. It was humble work. She tagged shirts, scrubbed stains out of suits, and pressed linens. The steam from the press hissed, reminding her of the atelier, but here nobody screamed at her. Mr. Miller, a kind man in his 70s, paid her in cash and leftover sandwiches from the deli next door. "You have good hands, Sarah," Mr. Miller said one afternoon, watching her repair a tear in an old lady's coat. "You stitch like a surgeon. Why are you here?" "I just want peace, Mr. Miller," she replied, biting a thread. Just peace. Meanwhile, the House of Thorn was collapsing in slow motion. The Fashion Week show had been a disaster. Without Sarah to fit the models and style the final looks, the garments looked ill-fitting. The finale dress, which Marcus tried to design himself in a panic, was ripped apart by critics. The New York Times headline read, "Thorn loses his thorny edge, a collection of confusion." Marcus was bleeding money. Investors were calling. He needed a miracle. He needed a scapegoat. He went on a talk show and hinted that a disgruntled former employee had sabotaged the collection before leaving. He didn't name Sarah, but he painted himself as the victim. Sarah saw the interview on the small TV in the dry cleaner's corner. She just turned the volume down and continued ironing a blue-collared shirt. She knew the truth. That was enough, or so she thought. It was a rainy Tuesday in November when the bell above the dry cleaner's door jingled. A woman walked in. She was soaking wet, holding a garment bag like it was a dead body. She was tall, wearing oversized sunglasses and a scarf that cost more than Sarah's rent. It was Victoria Sterling. Sarah froze behind the counter. Everyone knew Victoria Sterling. She was the heiress to the sterling steel fortune, a socialite who spent half the year in Paris and the other half in Monaco. She was known for being icy difficult and having impeccable taste. Victoria slammed the garment bag onto the counter. She pulled off her sunglasses, revealing sharp blue eyes red from frustration. "I need a miracle," Victoria said, her voice clipped and British. "And I was told this hole in the wall is the only place in Brooklyn that doesn't ask questions." "What seems to be the problem?" Sarah asked, keeping her head down. Victoria unzipped the bag. Inside was a vintage 1950s Dior gown. It was a legendary dress, champagne silk with intricate beading. But the back panel was destroyed, a massive tear right through the delicate lace and silk. My clumsy assistant stepped on the train while I was walking, Victoria hissed. I have the Met Gala in 2 days. The theme is Vintage Revival. If I don't wear this, I have nothing. I went to 3 tailors in Manhattan. They all said it's impossible to fix without ruining the integrity of the dress. Sarah touched the fabric. It was cold and slippery. She examined the tear. It was bad, jagged. They're right, Sarah said softly. You can't stitch this back together. The tension will rip the silk further. Victoria threw her hands up. Wonderful! Just wonderful! She grabbed the bag to leave. Wait, Sarah said. Victoria stopped. You can't stitch it, Sarah said, looking at the dress, her eyes narrowing in that way they used to when she was solving a problem at 3 a.m. But you can panel it. If I take the silk from the underlayer of the petticoat, which is the exact same dye lot, and create a floating applique over the tear using an invisible stitch, it won't look like a repair. It will look like a design choice. It will actually accentuate the waistline. Victoria stared at her. The arrogance faded from her face, replaced by curiosity. She looked at Sarah. Really looked at her, taking in the messy bun, the no-makeup face, the cheap apron. You know construction, Victoria said. It wasn't a question. I know a little, Sarah said. Do it, Victoria commanded. If you ruin it, I will sue this place into the ground. If you fix it, I will pay you double whatever you ask. I don't want double, Sarah said, taking the bag. I just want you to wait here. It will take 40 minutes. 45 minutes later, Victoria Sterling stood in the cramped fitting room of the dry cleaners, staring at her reflection in a cracked mirror. She ran her hands down the back of the Dior gown. The tear was gone. In its place was a cascading ripple of silk that looked like a waterfall frozen in time. It was better than the original. It was genius. Victoria walked out of the fitting room. She didn't look at Mr. Miller. She walked straight to Sarah, who was tagging a pile of laundry. "Who are you?" Victoria asked. Her voice was quiet and tense. "I'm just Sarah." "Don't lie to me," Victoria said. "I've worn Chanel Gaultier McQueen. I know the hands of a master when I see them. You didn't just fix this dress. You understood its soul and you elevated it. Why are you working in a dry cleaner in Brooklyn?" Sarah hesitated. She looked at the steam rising from the press. "Because it's quiet." Victoria studied her for a long moment. She reached into her purse and pulled out a checkbook. She wrote a number that made Mr. Miller gasp when he peeked over the counter. She placed the check on the counter. "This is for the dress." Then she pulled out a heavy cream-colored card with gold embossing. "And this," Victoria said, sliding it toward Sarah, "is for you." Sarah looked at the card. It was an invitation. The Sterling Foundation Annual Gala. Location, the Louvre, Paris. Date, December 15th. "I don't understand," Sarah said. "My family owns a textile mill in Lyon," Victoria said, leaning against the counter. "We supply fabrics to the biggest houses in the world, Gucci, Prada, and Thorne. I've been watching Marcus Thorne's work for years. The fabrics he orders, the way they are cut. And then 2 months ago the quality stopped. The genius vanished. And suddenly his new collection looked like garbage." Victoria leaned in closer, her eyes piercing. "I always wondered who the real talent was at House of Thorne. Marcus is a salesman, not an artist. I think I just found the artist." Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. "I can't go to Paris. I can't afford a flight. I don't have a dress." Victoria smiled. It was the first time she had smiled, and it transformed her face. It was a conspiratorial, dangerous smile. "I'm flying out tomorrow on my private jet. There's an empty seat. As for a dress, I have a feeling you can make something that will make Marcus Thorne choke on his champagne." "Why?" Sarah asked. "Why would you help me?" Victoria's expression hardened. "Because I hate thieves. And because the fashion world is boring right now. I want to drop a bomb on it. Are you coming, Sarah? or are you going to steam shirts for the rest of your life?" Sarah looked at the invitation. She thought about the way Marcus had looked at her, calling her a pair of hands. She thought about the 7 years of silence. She took off her apron. "I need to get my passport," Sarah said. The flight to Paris was a blur of champagne and luxury Sarah had never imagined. But she didn't relax. For the entire 8-hour flight, she sat at the table in the jet's cabin, sketching. Victoria had given her unlimited access to the Sterling Fabric Archive's digital catalogs of the rarest silks and brocades in the world. "You have access to the warehouse when we land," Victoria said, sipping sparkling water. "Make whatever you want. I want you to walk into that gala and outshine every celebrity there. But there's a catch." "What?" Sarah asked, pencil hovering over the paper. "You can't tell anyone who you are. Not yet. We let them wonder. We let the mystery build. Marcus will be there. He's desperate for investors. He'll be trying to charm my father. I want him to see you, but not know it's you. Not until the moment is right." Sarah nodded. She began to draw a dress that was unlike anything she had done for Thorne. Thorne's style was rigid, structural, aggressive. This was fluid. It was ethereal. It was a dress that looked like smoke and fire. They landed in Paris. The next 3 days were a fever dream. Sarah worked in the attic of the Sterling estate in Paris. She had assistants now, not interns, who were scared of her, but skilled seamstresses provided by Victoria, who treated Sarah with awe. The night of the gala arrived. The Louvre was lit up like a beacon. Red carpets were rolled out over the ancient cobblestones. The paparazzi were a wall of flashing lights, screaming the names of movie stars and models. Marcus Thorne arrived in a limousine. He stepped out wearing a tuxedo that was a bit too tight, a forced smile plastered on his face. He was sweating. The press had been brutal lately. Rumors of bankruptcy were swirling. He needed the Sterling family to invest in his brand tonight, or he was finished. He walked up the stairs waving. "Marcus! Marcus!" "Who are you wearing?" the reporters yelled. "Custom Thorne, of course," he bragged. He entered the grand hall. It was filled with the elite of Europe. He scanned the room looking for Victoria Sterling or her father Arthur Sterling. Suddenly the room went quiet. It wasn't a polite silence. It was a gasp, a collective intake of breath that swept through the hundreds of guests. Marcus turned toward the grand staircase. At the top of the stairs stood a woman. She was wearing a gown that defied logic. It was a deep, shimmering obsidian black that seemed to absorb the light, but as she moved, hidden layers of gold and crimson fabric flashed underneath like magma beneath volcanic rock. The bodice was structured like armor but looked as soft as water. A high collar framed her neck, giving her the regal bearing of a queen. She wore a domino mask, a sleek black masquerade mask that covered her eyes and cheekbones. Her lips were painted a deep red. Her brown hair was cascading in waves down her back. "Who is that?" someone whispered near Marcus. "Is that a Givenchy?" "No, look at the stitching. It's new." Marcus stared. He felt a cold knot form in his stomach. He didn't recognize the woman. The mask and the makeup changed her face completely, but he recognized the cut. He recognized the way the fabric moved. It was the technique he had taken credit for 7 years. But this was evolved. This was unleashed. The woman began to descend the stairs. Every camera in the room turned toward her. The media exploded. Flashbulbs went off like a strobe light, blinding and rapid. Victoria Sterling appeared at the bottom of the stairs, wearing the vintage Dior Sarah had fixed. She looked up at the mystery woman and smiled. She offered her hand. The mystery woman took it. Marcus pushed his way through the crowd. He had to know. He grabbed the arm of a waiter. "Who is she? Is she a countess? A model?" The waiter shook his head. "No one knows, monsieur. She came with Mademoiselle Sterling. They are calling her l'ombre, the shadow." The shadow. Sarah Vance walked into the center of the room. She was terrified, but she didn't show it. The dress was her armor. For the first time in her life, she wasn't hiding in the back room. She was the art, and she was walking straight toward Marcus Thorne. The ballroom of the Louvre was a shark tank disguised as a party, and Sarah Vance was the fresh blood. Yet strangely, the sharks weren't attacking. They were circling with reverence. As Sarah moved through the crowd parted. It was a sensation she had never experienced. For 7 years she had been invisible, the person people bumped into without saying, "Excuse me," the shadow in the corner holding the pins. Now countesses and tech billionaires were stepping back to give her space, their eyes glued to the obsidian masterpiece she wore. Victoria Sterling stayed close to her side, acting as a shield. "Don't speak unless you have to," Victoria whispered, her lips barely moving behind her champagne flute. "Let the dress do the talking. Mystery is the most expensive currency in this room." Sarah's heart was hammering against the boning of her corset. She saw faces she recognized from magazines. She saw the editor of Vogue Paris, a woman known to destroy careers with a single raised eyebrow. The editor was staring at Sarah's hemline with a look of pure, unadulterated lust. And then there was Marcus. He had pushed his way through the blockade of admirers. Up close, Sarah could see the cracks in his facade. There were dark circles under his eyes covered by thick concealer. His hands, usually manicured and steady, were twitching at his sides. He looked like a man who knew he was drowning. "Victoria," Marcus said, his voice oozing a charm that didn't reach his eyes. He nodded to the heiress, but his gaze immediately snapped to Sarah. He devoured the dress with his eyes. He was analyzing it, dissecting it, trying to figure out how the architecture of the bodice was possible. "Marcus," Victoria said coolly, "enjoying the evening?" "It's enlightening," Marcus replied. He took a step closer to Sarah. "And who is this? I don't believe we've been introduced." Sarah stiffened. She was inches away from the man who had screamed at her, belittled her, and told her she was nothing. She expected him to recognize her. She expected him to see the shape of her jaw, the color of her eyes behind the mask. But he didn't see her. He only saw the product. To Marcus Thorne, people were just coat hangers. He had never truly looked at Sarah Vance, the human being, so he couldn't recognize her now that she was wrapped in gold and black silk. "This is a friend of the family," Victoria said vaguely. "She prefers to remain private." "Private?" Marcus laughed, a brittle sound. "You don't wear a dress like that to remain private. That is a statement. That is revolution." He reached out his fingers, hovering over the fabric of Sarah's sleeve. "May I?" Sarah wanted to slap his hand away. Instead, she stood perfectly still like a statue. Marcus touched the silk. His eyes widened. "The weave, it's triple bonded, but it feels like water. And this stitching," he muttered to himself, "it's invisible. It's impossible." He looked up straight into Sarah's masked eyes. "Who made this? I need to know the designer. Is it Galliano? Is it a custom McQueen?" Sarah took a slow breath. She pitched her voice lower, softer, stripping away her flat American accent and replacing it with a whisper of ambiguity. "It is a ghost," she said. Marcus blinked. "A ghost? Someone who does not exist," Sarah said. "Someone who was erased." Marcus looked confused, but his greed quickly took over. "Well, tell your ghost that this is brilliant. I have an eye for talent. I could help them. House of Thorne is looking for fresh perspectives. If this designer wants a platform, I can give them the world." The irony was so thick it nearly choked her. He was offering to give the world to the woman he had fired for not ripping a seam fast enough. "I will pass on the message," Sarah said. "Do that," Marcus said, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a black titanium business card. He pressed it into her gloved hand. "Tell them Marcus Thorne is interested, and tell them I don't wait." He walked away confident that he had just made a power move. He didn't see the way Sarah crushed the card in her fist until the sharp edges bit into her palm. The rest of the night was a blur. The media dubbed her the Onyx Lady within the hour. By midnight, Nananta, the shadow designer, was trending globally on social media. People weren't talking about the Sterling Foundation. They were talking about the dress. They were analyzing the construction, the drama, the sheer audacity of it. And in every conversation, the House of Thorn was mentioned not as a competitor, but as the old guard, the dusty past. "Did you see Marcus Thorn's face?" a fashion blogger tweeted. "He looked like he was watching his own funeral." Back at the Sterling estate that night, Sarah finally took off the mask. She looked at herself in the mirror. She didn't look like the tired seamstress from the dry cleaners anymore. Her eyes were bright with adrenaline. "You did it," Victoria said, walking into the room with a tablet. "The offers are already coming in. Buyers from Dubai, London, Tokyo. They want to order the dress. They want to know the brand name." "There is no brand," Sarah said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "It's just me." "Not anymore," Victoria replied. She sat next to Sarah and showed her the screen. It was a stock market ticker. Thorn's stock dropped 4% since the gala started. Investors are nervous. They saw the difference between true art and mass-produced ego. Marcus is going to get desperate, and when he gets desperate he makes mistakes. Victoria looked at Sarah seriously. "We have his attention. Now we need to take his soul. Are you ready for the next step?" "What's the next step?" "We don't just wear the clothes." Victoria smiled cruelly. "We sell them. We launch a collection. But we do it in a way that forces Marcus to come to us on his knees." 2 weeks later, the fashion world was in a frenzy. The shadow designer had announced a pop-up showcase in New York City to be held at a secret location. The invitation was a single black feather, sent to only 50 of the most influential people in the industry. Marcus Thorn was not invited. He paced his office in Manhattan, screaming at his assistant. "What do you mean we can't get in?" Marcus yelled, throwing a stapler at the window. "I am Marcus Thorn. I built this city's fashion week." "They said the guest list is closed, sir," the assistant stammered. "Strictly no admittance without the feather." Marcus sank into his leather chair. His latest collection had been pulled from 2 major department stores due to quality control issues. In reality, the stores were clearing shelf space for the next big thing. He was bleeding cash. He needed to acquire this new designer. If he could buy this shadow, he could slap his name on their work and save his legacy. It was the only way. He grabbed his phone and dialed the one person who seemed to have a connection. "Victoria," he said when she answered, his voice tight. "Marcus," she answered, sounding bored. "To what do I owe the pleasure? I know you know who she is. The designer, the shadow." "I might. I need a meeting. I need to buy the brand. I'll offer $5 million. Cash, plus a creative director title under my label." Victoria laughed softly. $5 million? That's cute, Marcus. But this designer isn't interested in money. She's interested in integrity. Everyone has a price, Victoria. Just get me the meeting. Please. The silence on the line stretched for an agonizing 10 seconds. "Fine," Victoria said. She agreed to meet, but on her terms. Tonight, midnight, the warehouse district in Brooklyn. Come alone. Marcus didn't hesitate. "I'll be there." The warehouse was a cavernous, empty space that smelled of rain and old timber. It was lit by a single spotlight in the center of the room. Marcus walked in, his footsteps echoing on the concrete. He clutched his briefcase, which contained a contract he had hastily drawn up, a contract that would give him 100% ownership of the Shadow brand. "Hello!" he called out. "I'm here." There was a mechanical whirring sound. A large white screen descended from the ceiling in the center of the spotlight, blocking the view of the back of the warehouse. A silhouette appeared behind the screen. It was the shape of a woman seated at a table. She was backlit, so Marcus could only see her shadow. "You are late, Mr. Thorn," a voice came from a speaker. It was digitally altered, distorted to sound metallic and genderless. "Traffic," Marcus said, straightening his tie. He walked toward the screen but stopped when a red laser line appeared on the floor in front of him. "Do not cross the line," the voice commanded. "Theatrical," Marcus muttered, but he obeyed. Look, let's cut to the chase. You have talent. I have an empire. But right now you have buzz, and I have distribution. Buzz fades. Distribution lasts forever. I want to bring you into the House of Thorn. The silhouette behind the screen didn't move. You want to own me. I want to empower you. Marcus lied smoothly. I see myself in you. The drive. The vision. You know I built my company from nothing. I designed every stitch of my first 10 collections by hand. I know what it's like to be the genius in the room. Behind the screen, Sarah Vance sat in a comfortable chair speaking into a microphone. She had to cover her mouth to stop herself from laughing or screaming. You designed them yourself? Sarah asked through the distorter. Every stitch. Every single one, Marcus said. That's why I can help you. I can mentor you. I can teach you how to refine your raw talent into something marketable. Right now, your work is emotional. It's beautiful, but it lacks the discipline of a master. Sarah gripped the microphone. Discipline, she repeated. Like the discipline to treat your staff with respect. Marcus waved his hand dismissively. Staff are tools. They are replaceable. You and I, we are the artists. We are the gods. We don't worry about the feelings of the people who sweep the floor or sew the buttons. They exist to serve our vision. Sarah looked at Victoria, who was sitting next to her in the darkness behind the screen. Victoria's eyes were wide. Marcus was digging his own grave. I have a condition, Sarah said into the mic. Name it, Marcus said eagerly, opening his briefcase. I will design a collection for House of Thorn. It will be released under your label. It will save your company. But what? But I require full autonomy. You will not see the designs until the runway show. You will not step foot in the atelier while I work. You will sign a blind contract giving me total control of the creative output for this season. In exchange, you get the credit. You get to walk the runway at the end and take the bow. Marcus paused. It was risky. It was insane. No CEO would sign a blind contract. But he thought about his plummeting stock. He thought about the investors threatening to pull out. He thought about the humiliation of the last few months. He needed a win. He needed the world to think he was back. And I get to take the bow, Marcus asked. The world will think I designed it. If that is what you want, the voice said. The world will believe whatever you tell them. Done, Marcus said. I have the papers here. Leave them on the floor, the voice said. And leave. Marcus placed the leather folder on the concrete. You're making the right choice. We're going to be legends. He turned and walked out of the warehouse feeling triumphant. He had just secured the hottest talent in the world to be his ghostwriter. He thought he had won. Behind the screen, Sarah walked out and picked up the folder. She flipped through the contract. It was binding. It gave the Shadow, listed as a holding company owned by Victoria Sterling, complete control over the next House of Thorn collection. He didn't even read the fine print, Victoria said, looking over Sarah's shoulder. He never does, Sarah said. He thinks he's untouchable. Sarah looked at the signature. Marcus Thorn. He wants a show, Sarah whispered. I'm going to give him a show. The next 3 months were a covert military operation. Sarah moved back into the House of Thorn building, but not as herself. She worked at night, entering through the freight elevator. Her team comprised entirely of staff Marcus had fired over the years. Victoria had tracked them all down, pattern makers, seamstresses, embroiderers, people Marcus had called useless and old. They worked with a vengeance. They covered the windows of the atelier with black paper. Security guards hired by Victoria stood at the doors. Marcus kept his word, or rather he kept his distance, because he was terrified of voiding the contract. He spent his time giving interviews, hyping up his comeback. I've gone back to my roots, Marcus told GQ magazine. I've locked myself away, finding a new sound, a new silhouette. This collection is going to be the most personal thing I've ever done. Inside the atelier, Sarah was creating a collection that was indeed personal, but not to Marcus. It was a collection about abuse, about silence, about breaking free. She used fabrics that looked like bruised skin, mottled purples and blues that shifted in the light. She created corsets that looked like cages but with bursts of feathers exploding out of them, signifying escape. She designed heavy oppressive coats that could be unzipped to reveal delicate shining gold mesh underneath. It was violent, beautiful, and terrifying. "Are you sure about this?" Chloe, her former intern assistant who was now her right-hand woman, asked one night. They were looking at the finale piece. "It's aggressive." "It's the truth," Sarah said. "He wants to take credit for my work, fine. Let him take credit for this." The day of New York Fashion Week arrived. The House of Thorns show was the closing event. The venue was Lincoln Center. It was packed. Every seat was taken. The air was electric. Everyone wanted to see if Marcus Thorne still had it. Backstage, the atmosphere was different than usual. There was no screaming, no panic. Sarah's team was calm. They knew exactly what they were doing. Marcus was in his private dressing room drinking whiskey. He hadn't seen the clothes. He was nervous, but his ego kept him afloat. He checked his reflection. "You're the king," he told himself. "You're the king." The lights in the auditorium dimmed. The music started a low thrumming bass that sounded like a heartbeat. The first model walked out. She wore a structured jacket that looked like a straitjacket but tailored to perfection. The crowd gasped. It was dark. It was moody. It was brilliant. As the show progressed, the narrative on the runway became clear. The clothes went from restrictive and heavy to lighter, wilder, freer. It was a story of survival. The audience was mesmerized. Critics were already typing furiously on their phones. "Thorne is back. Dark genius. A masterpiece of pain." Marcus watched on the monitor in his dressing room. He grinned. It was working. They loved it. They loved him. He didn't understand the symbolism of the clothes. He just saw the applause. Then came the finale. The music cut out completely. Silence filled the hall. The final model walked out. She wasn't wearing a wedding dress, which was the tradition. She was wearing a trench coat. A simple, battered trench coat made of the finest cashmere but distressed to look old. She walked to the end of the runway. She stopped. She looked at the audience. Then she untied the belt and let the coat drop to the floor. Underneath, she wore a dress made entirely of rejection letters. Sarah had printed every rejection letter, every termination notice, every angry email Marcus had ever sent to his staff onto silk. The dress was a collage of his cruelty. But from a distance it looked like black and white newsprint. It was graphic. It was bold. But as the model turned, the giant screen behind the runway, which usually displayed the brand logo, flickered. The text on the screen changed. It didn't say House of Thorne. It said, "Designed by Sarah Vance." The audience murmured. Confusion rippled through the crowd. Who was Sarah Vance? Then the text changed again. Constructed by the hands he fired. And then a video began to play on the giant screen. It was the security footage from the warehouse meeting. The footage of Marcus standing in front of the screen. His voice boomed through the speakers of Lincoln Center crystal clear. "Staff are tools. They are replaceable. You and I. We are the artists. We are the gods. We don't worry about the feelings of the people who sweep the floor." The audience went dead silent. The shock was physical. In his dressing room, Marcus froze. The glass of whiskey slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor. On the runway, the model walked off. The stage was empty. The lights came up. Usually this was the moment Marcus would walk out, wave, and accept his flowers. But he couldn't move. He stared at the monitor. He saw the faces of the editors in the front row. They weren't clapping. They looked horrified. They looked disgusted. The screen on stage flashed one last time. "The ghost is real." And then from the side of the stage, Sarah Vance walked out. She wasn't wearing a mask. She wasn't wearing a gown. She was wearing jeans and a black t-shirt. Her hair was in a messy bun. She looked exactly like she did the night she walked away. She walked to the center of the runway. She stood in the spotlight. She didn't smile. She didn't wave. She just stood there owning the silence. And then one person started clapping. It was Victoria Sterling in the front row. Then another. Then another. Suddenly the room erupted, but they weren't cheering for the brand. They were cheering for the woman. They were cheering for the truth. Marcus Thorne heard the roar of the crowd, but he knew with a sinking, sickening certainty that the applause was not for him. It was the sound of his empire crumbling. The applause at Lincoln Center did not die down. It grew into a rhythmic thundering noise that shook the floorboards. It was the sound of a verdict. Sarah stood center stage, bathed in the white-hot glare of the spotlights. She could see the silhouette of Marcus in the wings. He was being restrained by two large security guards that Victoria Sterling had hired. His face was a mask of purple rage, his mouth moving in silent screams that were drowned out by the ovation for the woman he had called nothing. Sarah didn't look at him. She looked at the front row. She saw the tears in the eyes of the fashion students who had sneaked in. She saw the stoic nod of the Vogue editor. She saw Chloe, her assistant, weeping openly by the soundboard. Sarah turned and walked back up the runway. She didn't run. She didn't rush. She walked with the same steady, quiet pace she had used when she left the House of Thorn in the rain. As she passed Marcus in the wings, the music stopped. The house lights came up. The backstage area was a chaotic swarm of reporters, cameramen, and models. Marcus broke free from the guards and lunged toward her. "You ruined me!" he shrieked, his voice cracking. "You ungrateful little rat, I made you! I gave you a job when you were nobody!" Sarah stopped. She turned to face him. The cameras were rolling. Every iPhone in the vicinity was raised, recording the moment live to the world. "You didn't make me Marcus," Sarah said. Her voice was calm, but it carried across the crowded hallway. "You erased me. There is a difference." "I will sue you." Marcus spat sweat dripping down his forehead. "I will take everything that collection, it's mine. The contract says House of Thorn." Victoria Sterling stepped out from behind Sarah. She looked immaculate, cool, and deadly. She held a copy of the contract in her hand. "Actually, Marcus," Victoria said, her British accent cutting through the noise like a scalpel, "if you had read the addendum on page 42, the one you signed so eagerly in the warehouse, you would know that the intellectual property of the Shadow Collection remains with the creator until the agreed-upon release clause is met." "What release clause?" Marcus demanded, his eyes darting around. "The clause that states the House of Thorn must be solvent and free of any labor disputes." Victoria smiled. "And considering the video we just played exposing your labor practices, and the class action lawsuit filed by your former staff 20 minutes ago, you are in breach of contract." Marcus froze. "Lawsuit." "My lawyers are very efficient," Victoria said. "The collection doesn't belong to you, Marcus. It belongs to Sarah. And the pre-orders. The millions of dollars in sales that just came in during the show, that goes to her too." Marcus staggered back. He looked at the models, women he had criticized for years. He looked at the seamstresses standing behind Sarah, women he had fired. They were all looking at him with pity. Not anger, just pity. He realized in that moment that he wasn't a king. He was just a man in a rented tuxedo standing in a room full of people who finally knew the truth. He turned to run to hide in his dressing room, but the press blocked his path. "Mr. Thorne, is it true you haven't designed a dress since 2015? Mr. Thorne, what do you have to say to the staff you fired? Mr. Thorne, are you declaring bankruptcy?" Sarah watched him disappear into the sea of flashing lights. She felt a hand on her shoulder. It was Chloe. "Are you okay?" Chloe asked. Sarah took a deep breath. For the first time in 7 years, the weight on her chest was gone. "I'm ready to go home," Sarah said. The fall of the House of Thorn was swift and brutal. Within 48 hours, the board of directors fired Marcus. The stock plummeted to pennies. The bank seized the building. But from the ashes, something else rose. 6 months later, on a quiet street in the meatpacking district, a new sign was hung above a renovated brick building. It didn't have a pretentious name. It didn't have a golden logo. It simply read, Vance. Inside the atelier was filled with light. There were no screaming bosses, no shattered glass. There was music playing soft jazz and the smell of fresh coffee. Sarah walked through the rows of sewing machines. She stopped at a table where an older woman was struggling with a complex hem. It was the same woman Marcus had fired for having arthritis in her hands. "Let me show you a trick," Sarah said gently. "If you bias cut the lining, it takes the tension off the wrist." The woman smiled. "Thank you, Sarah." "Boss," Chloe called out from the front desk. "You have a visitor?" Sarah walked to the front. Standing there was a young girl, maybe 19. She was clutching a sketchbook to her chest, looking terrified. She wore a cheap coat and shoes that were falling apart. "Can I help you?" Sarah asked. "I read your story," the girl stammered. "I saw the video. I want to be a designer. But my professor told me I don't have the look. He said I should quit." Sarah looked at the girl's knuckles. They were taped up, pricked by needles. She looked at the sketchbook. It was battered just like Sarah's used to be. Sarah remembered the feeling of being invisible. She remembered the rain. She remembered the silence. "What's your name?" Sarah asked. "Emily," the girl whispered. Sarah smiled. She reached out and opened the door to the atelier wide. "Come in, Emily," Sarah said. "We don't care about the look here. We only care about the work, and I think you have a lot to say." As the girl walked in, eyes wide with wonder, Sarah looked out the window. Across the street, a man was walking by. He was wearing a ragged coat, looking at the ground, holding a flyer for a job fair. It was Marcus. He looked up and saw her. Their eyes locked through the glass. He stopped. For a moment he looked like he wanted to come over, to beg, to scream, to say something. Sarah didn't look away. She didn't frown. She simply raised her hand and gave a small, polite nod. A final acknowledgement of a ghost. Then she turned her back on him. She walked back to her team, back to the fabric, back to the hum of the machines. She had a collection to finish, and this time every single thread would belong to her. She had walked away without a word, and in doing so, she had found her voice. Sarah Vance proved that true power isn't about who screams the loudest. It's about who has the strength to stay silent until the moment is right. Marcus Thorne built a castle on a foundation of lies, believing that he could crush the people who held him up. But he forgot that when you break the foundation, the whole house comes down. Sarah didn't just win a lawsuit or a fashion show. She reclaimed her dignity. It's a reminder to all of us, your talent is your property. Your self-worth is non-negotiable. Never let anyone convince you that you are just a pair of hands. You are the architect of your own life. If you are in a place where you aren't valued, don't scream. Just walk away, sharpen your skills, and wait for your moment to shine. The truth always has a way of revealing itself. What did you think of Sarah's revenge? Would you have stayed silent for that long, or would you have exposed him sooner? Let me know in the comments below. If this story inspired you, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you want more stories about justice underdogs and incredible twists, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss a video. Share this with a friend who needs a reminder of their own worth. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.